There have been many successful and failed military coups in Nigeria since the country's independence in 1960. Let's go back in history to the events leading up to the 1983 coup d'etat.
All right, in 1979, the late Shehu Shagari was chosen by the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, as the presidential candidate for the general election of that year. He went on to win, becoming the president and head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. After the expiration of his first term, Shagari ran for a second four-year term in 1983 and won the general election. But only 3 months after being re-elected, President Shehu Shagari was overthrown during his second and final term of office.
Now, the Shagari administration was plagued by allegations of corruption, including allegations of electoral fraud in the 1983 election. This, coupled with a decline in world oil prices and a deterioration in the national finances, hardship led to the regime becoming deeply unpopular with citizens. It was based on this and other national issues that on December 31, 1983, Shagari was overthrown in a military coup terminating Nigeria's Second Republic, and General Muhammadu Buhari was made head of state. The Nigerian military coup of December 31, 1983 was coordinated by key officers of the Nigerian military.
Participants of the 1983 coup d'etat: Major General Muhammadu Buhari, Moshood Kashimawo Abiola, Major General Ibrahim Babangida, Brigadier Ibrahim Bako, Brigadier Sani Abacha, Brigadier Tunde Idiagbo, Lieutenant Colonel Aliu Muhammad, Lieutenant Colonel Halilu Akilu, Lieutenant Colonel David Mark, Lieutenant Colonel Tunde Ogbeha, Major Sambo Dasuki, Major Abdumumuni Aminu, Major Lawan Gwadabe, and Major Mustafa Jokolo, and Major Abubakar Umar. But some whose names were mentioned in the coup have denied playing any active role in the coup.
Well, General Muhammadu Buhari administered Nigeria as a military head of state from December 31 to 1983 until, that's December 31, 1983 until Saturday, August the 27th of 1985, when he was removed in yet another military coup. Now, between 1966 and 1999, the army held power in Nigeria without interruption, apart from a short-lived return to democracy between 1979 and 83. Now, today makes it 35 years since that future-altering military coup of 1983. Well, appropriately described as a future-altering one. Well, that's the question we'll be asking our security consultant, our guest this morning, Colonel Hassan Stanlabo, retired, joining us to examine the dynamics that played out in the 1983 coup. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Morning,
nice to see
Mike.
you. Yeah, nice to see you guys.
Compliments of the season
Same to you.
How appropriate is it, you know, that we're actually, 35 years to the day when that military coup in 1983 happened, and incidentally, it looks like all the players...
Exactly 35 years today.
Exactly 35 years. It looks like all the players in that coup are still very, very much around. As a matter of fact, the beneficiary of that particular coup is the president right now. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a good number of the actors, so to speak, are still very much around with us, even though age, you know,
may have
could
taken
be taking its toll on
Mm.
them and so on. You know, they are still very much around, and recalling what happened, looking back into the history of it and so on. I think there'll be enough reference material to fall back on, more so when you have one-on-one discussion with a good number of them. But that is the situation. It's 35 years today. Have things really changed so far and so on? These are questions which our Nigerians may want to ask. What has changed, really? What actually informed the coup?
Now, let me help you out with that.
Yes,
quoting Sani Abacha, who made that coup speech in that year, that particular day, our economy has been hopelessly mismanaged, and we have become a debtor and beggar nation. Just one of the statements made at the time. And then in quote again, inadequate food at reasonable prices, health services in shambles, no drugs in hospitals, and deteriorating educational system.
Yeah, I would say the situation has not really changed, and for reasons which are best known to us all. For instance, let me say, the last 16 years to 2015 saw us as a nation go into some level of wastage by virtue of all the leakages that existed within the system. We could have, if we had well managed the period before 2015, when the present administration came in, by, you know, bringing in some of the prudence we see ongoing today, maybe we could have gotten somewhere as a nation by committing our resources, you know, in a more accountable manner and things like that. So because of that, things have not really changed, because as it is right now, we are busy managing the wrongs we as a nation committed yesterday.
All right. That Nigerians will also ask the question whether there has really been any change, if there has been a 16 years of wastage somehow, like as anybody will put it, because you're not the first person saying this. Yeah. Whether 3 years into this administration, steps would have been taken for Nigerians to have confidence in the fact that, okay, you cannot transform or change the 16 years of wastage overnight, but there are steps where Nigerians can bond with, where Nigerians can point to, where Nigerians can have confidence in the fact that, yes, this is the right steps in the right direction as at now, 3 years ago.
Thank you, Mike. You are very, very correct. However, it is important that we put things in the right perspective and allow some objectivity to prevail in our analysis, all right, of the situation on ground. We may not all be satisfied with what the present government has done so far. As an individual, I am not satisfied, even though I am a big fan of Mr. President. But then, I agree that, or we must accept that, for instance, in the area of agriculture, we have seen some steps being taken to see that we are able to attain some level of self-sufficiency, maybe in certain food items, maybe rice, which would be, you know, the food item everybody will want to say, yes, I think there is a reasonable level of success in this direction, and so on. And if we continue in that trend, as far as agric is concerned, I think maybe by the end of the second fourth term, which I know Mr. President will be coming on board to run through, we might see a lot of
That's for Nigerians to decide.
Yes, it's my personal opinion. Okay. It's that's where my own vote is going to, so it's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever the case, and then secondly, as far as infrastructure is concerned, I agree there is a minus that we are doing a lot of borrowing, but the plus there is that the borrowing we are doing is going into capital projects, improving our infrastructure, which is very, very, very important.
Okay, let's put you on hold a little bit. We'll come back to your itemizing those things as we get along. Let's bring in Dr. Fasi Yusuf here. He's a PR consultant and political analyst joining us on Skype. Now, Dr. Yusuf, it's good to have you join us. 35 years since the military coup that truncated our second republic. Here we are today, 35 years today, and the players and the major beneficiary of that government becomes the president today. Well, all the reasons given for the coup on the 31st of December 1983, if you listen to all the reasons at that time and you compare to where we are right now, has there been any change from what you have analyzed or what you can assess?
Well, my verdict is that we have not learned much and we have not forgotten much. And that's to put it mildly, because some of the issues raised then are still very much with us. Yeah. If you talk about the economy, you talk about the poverty level, you talk about corruption, you talk about the security situation in the country, which now is worse than it was then. And I think, generally speaking, not much in terms of development. I remember, that time, that was before the coup, there was the idea being mooted by the Lagos State government to have a metro line. And unfortunately, when they came on board, they could not secure a credit line for the metro line. And it's the same metro line now the Lagos State government has been trying to put on stream in the last 12 years. without much success. And I think generally we have a lot to do in this country. Although I want to subscribe to what the former president of the United States, that was Clinton, said, that things are slow in a democracy, but without a democracy, you cannot have sustainable development.
Now, how instructive is it? Because we cannot talk about 35 years of military coup without talking about the man who was president at the time, who only passed on on Friday. Talking about none other than Alhaji Shehu Shagari himself, who has been described, in very glowing terms. Nigeria at the time, when Shagari was president in 1983, it was, of course, the fourth largest democracy in the world after India, US, and Japan. Now, looking at Nigeria's history down the line since that time till date, would you say that the military incursion really, turned out to be a curse or a blessing for Nigeria?
Well, I'd like to return a verdict of being a curse, because there were a series of coups thereafter, or attempted coup and all that. And as I said, without a full-blown democracy, you cannot have sustainable development. And the military incursion into the polity of this country has made it impossible for us to realize our potentials. And I think since it's no longer the version now, I think our politicians will have learned their lessons, and they will have been in a position to move the country forward, or better than it is now.
If politicians should learn or have learned their lessons, come to think of it, do you think all those who took part in that 1983 coup, including the beneficiary today, owe Nigeria and Nigerians some kind of apology? Not just apology in words, but in demonstration of the fact that, look, this was a government that was actually on track at the time, compared to, if we were to compare the prevailing circumstances with what obtained at the time and what obtains now, would you expect an apology, from the actors in that coup?
Expecting an apology, as far as I'm concerned, would, I think, be asking for too much.
Why?
Instead, I would want to say, I expect that we tread with some caution as we move on. Why would I not outrightly demand an apology? Because was the situation really messy? Yes, it was. But was a coup d'etat supposed to have come in to address the situation? It depends on who is answering. What if I say, no, I wouldn't have opted for a coup d'etat, but look forward to a people's uprising? That could equally be disastrous. Today, I run into people who really don't subscribe to military overthrowing governments the way I don't subscribe to it, because I'm a Democrat. But I must tell you that at the pace at which we are going, in another 10, 15 years, there could be a people's uprising. I don't think that is instigating anybody. We are not looking back to what happened in France.
Yeah, but don't you think a people's uprising is actually what really brings about that change that every society looks for? Whether you're talking about the French Revolution, where the people actually went on the streets, and then you have the orange vests, going on in protests in France. Now, when the people actually own the process and say, this is how far we'll go.
That is it.
Or this is what we want, or this is what we don't want.
Because the final power rests actually with the people. And if they come out in unison and say, no, we don't like what we see happening, and this is what we want, that's the people's uprising.
Yeah. On the other hand, a lot of Nigerian leaders have, not necessarily presidents, but people who understand the dynamics of Nigeria, the complexity of Nigeria, have said that when it comes to that kind of uprising, Nigeria may not be a fertile ground for that kind of uprising if you compare it to either the French Revolution or even the Arab Spring and so on. What do you say?
Mike, did any of us know that the Abiola and what's his vice president's name now, this gentleman?
Kingibe.
The Abiola Kingibe ticket was going to be acceptable in a universal manner, the way Nigerians went for it. A situation where even this gentleman from Kano, the opponent to Abiola, lost even at his own ward level. Nigerians went for that. Look, when the people see genuineness behind you, they go for it. The problem we have is that we've never had leaders who come clean to us. Our problem has always been leadership. Leadership. When they see genuine leadership, sincerely, religion and tribe plays no.
Is it just leadership or military incursion? Let me bring this, to Dr. Fasi Yusuf, who is online, with us via Skype. Is it just the leadership that has failed Nigeria and Nigerians, or military incursion? Because this is what we're even talking about. 35 years of military incursion into our system. Colonel Stan Labo just talked about the Abiola, Kingibe ticket, where Nigerians actually bought into that ticket and gave that ticket massive support. But it was the military that still truncated it. Yes. Now, the question I asked him earlier, whether there is a need for some kind of apology for Nigeria to actually, because it looks like the death of Shehu Shagari, and of course the fact that the beneficiary of that coup is in government today, it seems to be instructive. It might just provide a watershed for Nigeria to actually move forward. What do you think?
Well, the problem with the country has to do with the leadership as well as the followership, both. And again, as at that time, coup d'etat were fashionable, unlike now. So I did not think, I think it was a shadow of necessity as at that time. And I think it's not part of our history. So we are treating an apology, to me, would not be necessary or will not be necessary, because the country was going through a tumultuous period, and it was necessary for some drastic action to be taken. And of course, if we had had a people's revolution, it would have been worse, because when you talk about a revolution, it would be unmanageable, and we will not be talking about what we are talking now. And that's why every patriot is saying now that, look, we must get our bearings right, otherwise we may not know the end of the catastrophe looming light. And therefore, it is expedient for we Nigerians, both at the leadership level and the followership level, to do what is right, to get ourselves involved in transparency, accountability, probity, and also to get involved in development issues that will prepare this country and that will also make this country to realize its potentials.
All right. The Second Republic had several policies which Nigerians benefited somehow. We remember the housing, the Shagari locust, where in parts of the country we still have those until today, and all of that. But what do you think is the greatest legacy? First, Dr. Yusuf, I'm staying with you. What do you think is the greatest legacy of the Second Republic for Nigeria and to Nigerians?
Well, we're talking, as at that time, that was the first time we were experiencing or experimenting with a presidential system of government. And I think if we had continued with that, that way, perhaps we'll have been able to have a presidential system that would be peculiar to Nigeria. But as at that time, we were talking about executive president and all the rest, but not much was achieved. But in terms of bringing the country together, don't forget that as at that time, there were just about 4 or 5 political parties. Now we're talking about 89 political parties, which to me is incongruous. But it was a period we were supposed to have learned from the military incursion of January 15, 1966, to the time General Obasanjo handed over on October 1st, 1979. But unfortunately, we have not been able to achieve much. But I hope we'll be able to sustain democracy and we'll be able to make a democracy to work in this country. Otherwise, I fear the eyes of Arab Spring.
Colonel Stan Labo, it's been said over and over again that the worst democratic government is better than the best military administration. Would you subscribe to that?
Yeah, I would, but let's face it. The fiat with which certain positive steps could be taken under a military administration cannot be taken in that way under a democratic setting.
Like the creation of states, for example.
Thank you.
19 states at the time, the Shagari administration was removed. Of course, in 1999, the 1999 constitution that we have continued to say, many Nigerians have continued to say is a faulty constitution from the get-go because it is not a people's constitution. And that raises the question of the issue of restructuring, you know, the...
Yes, comes in. And that is why I still tell a lot of people that, look, the way things are today, we cannot really do any far-reaching amendment to our constitution. Why? The same individuals who are supposed to, whose responsibility it is statutorily to amend the constitution, are the same individuals who are against the amending, irrespective of whatever their lips are saying to us. They can never amend it in such a way that they stop paying themselves all the huge millions we hear they take home. All sorts of figures have been bandied, 29 million a month, 14 million, we don't know which is which, but we just know it's outrageous. There is no way they want to sit down to make any form of amendment that will see them not to take home such, or make an amendment that will make them become mere part-time legislators and take home just peanuts, or create a situation where, for instance, we see legislators as individuals who already have succeeded in life. They are not coming to look for money, but they now want to leave footprints in the sound of time. And so they are all out to sacrifice for the country. But today, we have people who have no business address going into the house for a full-time job, so every kobo matters to him. You can't make any improvement with such individuals. You can't. You can't. We need people who really love this country and who have already paid their dues.
So would you subscribe to this fiat that you talk about, which the military actually, military administration enjoys as against a democratic system? That is, if we're truly practicing democracy. Some would say we're just practicing a civilian,
civilian military.
Civilian
military system.
Yes. Is that the kind? Would you like that kind of fiat to be in place right now? Talking about the minimum wage, for example, that seems to be experiencing some kind of go slow.
If only leadership at all levels could really have the feelings of the people at heart. Some level of fiat will come into play in the way we go about governance, such that we do not keep the people waiting, hoping, and crying for a minimum wage, while we keep speaking grammar from one committee to another committee to another committee. And people are dying with 18,000 naira, and others are taking home 39 million every month. Yeah. It's unfair.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Yusuf here on Skype. Now, the point there is, a lot of analysts have also said that the Nigerian brand of military coups and military dictators have not been really visionary enough. Making reference to Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, almost everyone has read the Third World to First World. We've also seen Dubai. The decisions to make those countries what they are were under very strong either dictatorship or some kind of military formation, where they were visionary enough to see 50 years ahead and even 100 years ahead of their country, putting that map, the roadmap on the ground. At the time, it was also in this country that the head of state, former head of state, was saying, we had so much money, we didn't know what to do with it. So would you agree that the Nigerian military, those who were involved in the leadership during the military, were not visionary enough to translate our resources into that kind of vision?
I think all of us will have to share part of the blame. The military incursion into the body policy of this country, to a large extent, has been a misadventure, because most of them were not matured. Some of them were coming in as a 32-year-old Nigerian, 30-something, and some of them were not even married when they assumed the leadership of this country. And I mean, somebody who joined the military at the age of 20, 21, and served only 10 years, only to become the head of state and all the rest. And some who were just 15 years old, old in the military, becoming a general. 1 star, 2 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, and all that. And I think, looking back, one can return a verdict that, to a large extent, it was a misadventure. But then, what have we as civilians done? To my mind, I think, as I said earlier, we have not learned much. We have not forgotten. In fact, we seem to have forgotten all those things we should have learned. And therefore, it's been a vicious circle. The country has not made much progress. We mentioned the case of a former head of state saying that we had so much money, but our problem was how to spend the money. And if we had, coming out of the Civil War in 1970, January, the country would have done a lot, because I remember United Arab Emirates that we have today. I was just still grappling. And at the time, too, the Singapore experience you mentioned, at the time, Singapore was a pariah state. And also Malaysia, they came to this country for some agricultural produce and all that. So where are we? You see, this country is a private school.
Very good question.
Society.
Yeah.
Dr. Yusuf Fassi, thank you very much for your time, PR consultant and political affairs analyst, and of course, Colonel Stan Labo. Thank you very much, retired Colonel. Actually itching to say something about that. I don't know if you have just 1 second to actually say that.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say that, look, we must show some understanding to the cadre of officers that emerged at that time.
Okay.
Because what was the level of education? What was the level of exposure? What was the quality or the maturity that existed? Can you compare those officers with today's officers?
All right, good place to leave it. Thank you very much
So we should show some understanding.
this morning.
All right.